In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunskyMysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to another exciting episode of Surrounded by Idiots. My name is Bill Zam, and this is the Saline Entertainment Television Group, and we are the Michigan League of Fed Up Citizens. We are having, believe it or not, here in southeast Michigan, some of the wildest weather that you have seen in a long time. We got that storm system that was in the Oklahomas, but we didn't get any real bad thunderstorms or anything out of it. We did get some torrential rain, and now we got wind. Our wind is up around 30 miles an hour out there. The wind is blowing like crazy. I, of course, am here in the studio. We are all set, ready to go. We have all of our alternative energy equipment ready to go just in case. I'm also wearing my heart monitor tonight, right here on my wrist. I've got the transmitter strapped to my chest, and I am also wearing the EKG machine that the cardiologist has assigned to me. Has all the electrodes and everything all over my chest that I have to wear for a month. So, let's get on with the show. You know, we are, in fact, living in a hydraulic empire. We are living in a hydraulic empire. Do you know what that means? Do you know what a hydraulic empire is? Yeah, you can look it up on the internet. We live in a hydraulic empire. And we are also living in the age of corporate feudalism is what we live in. We live in a feudal type society, and it is run by corporations. I mean, haven't you noticed the rat trap that we're in? Let's take a look at alternative energy as an example. You can use so-called grid power, and it'll cost you such and such a month every month. You can go totally off the grid. You can use off-the-grid power, solar panels, deep cycle batteries, and everything, which, oddly enough, will cost you what is nearly equal to the same amount that you would pay for grid power over the same period of time that it takes for it to become a neutral cost factor. Let me explain. If you're paying $100 a month for your electric bill, if there is any such thing anymore, and you go out and convert your entire house to alternative energy, it's going to cost you about $100 a month for that alternative energy, the same amount that it's going to cost you for that grid power. And the payoff time is about 20 years. So if you're in your 50s like me, you're going to be like 70 or 80 years old by the time it gets paid off. Or take gasoline and hybrid cars. The more expensive payments for the hybrid car and higher cost per gallon of fuel would equal purchasing a much cheaper used vehicle and paying more for the volume of fuel. Now, there are those who would say, just go back to riding a bicycle, like that's some sort of great technological feat. I would propose to those comrades that they go back to living in the wild with no clothes. Since you wish me to go back in technology, you should too, comrade. Or take the consumption of meat. It has been decided by the overlords that we should all be vegetarians because, you know, meat's bad for you, according to them. Thus, The food for the meat animals is used to make fuel for the vehicles that are flex fuel, and thus the price of meat necessarily skyrockets. And the plentiful veggies from Mexico or other places is placed before your wondering eyes. And now, keep in mind, because you don't know this, that the federal environmental overlords have decreed that any fuel pump that has an E85 pump attached to it now has a minimum amount of gas that you can purchase. That's right, a minimum amount that you can purchase. Why? Because apparently motorcycle riders are so stupid they might use the wrong gasoline in their motorcycle. The gist of it is that the life that we are doled out is green and is made from people. I call it the gradual and forceful reduction in quality of life according to the needs of the corporate neo-feudalism. Now, I don't know if you watched this today. We watched this here at the SETV headquarters. And there was a lot of clapping, a lot of cheering, and a lot of hugging going around. Because we watched that Felix guy jump out of that capsule attached to that balloon higher than any person has gone attached to a balloon. He jumped out higher than any person has ever jumped out and parachuted to the ground. He broke the sound barrier with his body on the way down. It was amazing. And I keep thinking that, you know, we've just about broken every record that we humans can break. We've been to the moon and back. We have this guy, he jumped from something like 25 miles up in the air. We've gone faster than the speed of sound on land. I mean, all sorts of records have been broken. I mean, how many are left? But you know, that guy that floated into space and skydived back to Earth didn't do it because he gets his green slop dole from the government. No, not at all. We as humans choose to do this type of thing because these things, they're not easy. But because they are hard, because they challenge us, challenge all of us to be better than we were yesterday or the day before. They challenge us to be the very best that we can possibly be, faster, better than before. And we want all people, everywhere, to do better for themselves, not to have the government dole out the green slop at the behest of the corporations. Now, don't get me wrong, because I know damn well that half of you just did. The overlords are not the small business people that employ the vast majority of us. They are the controllers of the money, the behind-the-scenes Manchurian string pullers of the puppet socialist rulers. What we should have is cities on the moon. We should have people on Mars. We should have ended hunger worldwide by now. We should have been able to show the people of the world that this right here is what you can achieve when you have the one word that has been lost by the sheeple. And that word is called freedom. Freedom to choose your way. Freedom to pick your path, where you live, what you eat, how you get it, and who you decide to associate with. Right now, if you happen to associate with left-wing, half-witted shits that shovel out the socialist and communist way, the people that stone women to death and use children in their armies, well then you're in their club. But if you're someone who wants that freedom thing, then you're a terrorist. And it is that mindset that we need to get rid of in just a few weeks, once and for all. And that was tonight's monologue. And I'm sure that the NSA agents are outside right now with the heart attack gun aiming it at me. So let's see. No, my pulse is only at 92 right now. Perhaps it's all that aluminum foil I have strapped onto the outside of the building that might be protecting me. Now, let's get on to our very first story of the night. and that is this. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, incidentally, don't forget that our show notes, the script that I have right here in front of me, the show notes that we base the entire show on will be at ussamichigan.com after the show, along with the audio version of tonight's broadcast. That's ussamichigan.com, along with all of the links that we talk about on the show. So you can follow along if you happen to be listening to the archived version of the show. If not, and you are watching live, then you can follow along by reading off the screen with me, but not out loud. It'll distract me. A magma dome has been discovered, and it is at the border of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, and sits on the, I'm going to mess this up for sure, Altiplano Puna Plateau in the central Andes region, home of the largest active magma body in Earth's continental crust, and known for a long history of massive volcanic eruptions. And here it is. Right here on the screen, this comes to us from ScienceDaily.com. That's ScienceDaily.com. And this is in Science News. And this article is dated October 11th, 2012. Scientists at the Scripps Institution of Oceanology at UC San Diego have used 20 years of satellite data to reveal a geological oddity unlike any seen on Earth. Here's the map over here on the right. They call this the sombrero because the shape of the dome, the center part there that's red, that is the highest part going down to the lowest part. And you can see, according to these people that have done this study, that as this magma dome comes up, it kind of looks like a volcano there from the top, doesn't it? That's kind of scary to think about. As you can see, the center of it, as it comes up, the blue area around it has been descending. It has been going down in altitude, while the center, the red part, has been going up. And that makes it shaped like a sombrero. And you can see it there. Now, there's no red alert or doom associated with this because the magma is at a very great depth. And it's a fairly slow growth rate. The Earth rises at about a centimeter per year, or roughly the rate fingernails grow. My fingernails grow longer than a centimeter per year, you idiots. It's obviously a misprint, not spell checked or fact checked by a scientist. The details of the study, which was published by the National Science Foundation, are published in the October 12th issue of the journal Science, oddly enough. It's a subtle motion, pushing up little by little every day, but in this persistence, it makes this uplift unusual, said some guy by the name of Falco. Obviously, one of the scientists that's working on this. That is a very, very interesting little bit of information. And I was thinking, while I was researching this particular article, that isn't it funny that where this uplift is, where this volcanic magma uplift is, they have a lot of major earthquakes in that area, don't they? When you think about it, Yellowstone, that's having some lifting as well, and that's a super volcano right there. And they have a lot of earthquakes in California. I wonder if anybody, and don't forget the area around Italy, where they have a lot of earthquakes, and they've got some big volcanoes there. I wonder if anybody's ever done a study to look for these earthquake swarms to see if there's any magma uplifting associated with it that would point them into potential volcano activity in the future. I wonder if anybody's done that, or if it's just maybe I'm just I don't know, an idiot. Who knows? After all, the show is called Surrounded by Idiots. Now, for our next story. This is very important for a lot of our audience. This is important to me. This is important to a lot of people in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Florida, Missouri, Louisiana, and any other place where they have a hunting season. A lot of people here in Michigan rely on the hunting season, the deer season, as well as the turkey season, to put food on their table throughout the year and throughout the winter. You can go out and you can hunt deer here in Michigan. We have a musket season, we have a bow season, we have a shotgun season. The upper part of Michigan, you can use a rifle still, not here in the lower part of Michigan because there's too many people. But we have, here in Michigan anyways, an awful lot of hunters. And it has been said that the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and I believe Wisconsin have a standing armed population of over 1 million hunters. That's just the hunters. That doesn't include the people that have protection for their home or people that wear firearms on the job. 1 million people. That's a lot of hunters out there. Now, there is an issue with the deer population, and it is national. The entire country has been beset by this problem. And that is that mass deer deaths. It's the mass deer death doom story. From Caldwell County, North Carolina, a disease is killing deer by the hundreds in the North Carolina foothills. Most of the people, Eyewitness News talked with, reported seeing the deer carcasses near creeks in northern Caldwell County. Wildlife biologist says that's because the deer look for a cool place after their temperature spikes while fighting off the virus. And what virus is this? It's the deer version of Ebola. And here is another story. Soaring number of dead deer in South Dakota and Nebraska attributed to viral diseases known as EHD and blue tongue. As a result, the South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks Commission has pulled all unsold licenses in 6 area counties. That means if you don't have your hunting permit, you ain't getting one. That's going to shut an awful lot of people out. That's not a good thing. Conservation Officer Sam Schilhaas of Yankton County has received reports of hundreds of dead deer in area counties with about 1,000 reported mortalities just in southeast South Dakota. That's a lot of deer. Across the border, Nebraska says that nearly 5,000 deer have died as of September 28th. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources has received reports of 2,043. Oh, no, come on. Where do they come up with a number? 2,043 exactly. Deer deaths from 76 counties likely caused by the epizootic hemorrhagic disease, the deer version of Ebola, a virus spread by biting midges and is often fatal to white-tailed deer. Deer experience high fever and are often found dead in and around water sources. Last summer's drought conditions likely contributed to the severity of this year's outbreak. And when you apply logic to it, if there's a drought, all the streams are dried up. So if you find the bodies near streams, how does that compute if there's no water because the streams are dried up? Just wondering. Columbia. Missouri's white-tailed deer continue to be killed by a disease transmitted by midge flies. Grand Rapids, Michigan. There are hundreds of new reports of deer deaths throughout western Michigan. Counties and deaths have been in the southern half of Michigan's lower peninsula. They expect more to be found as farmers harvest their crops and hunters take to the field this year. But the first hard frost should kill the flies that have transmitted the disease. And the DNR says, you're going to love this part. So these deer, They got the Ebola deer version. And the DNR here in Michigan says, this is a quote from the DNR, the edibility of the venison is not affected by this disease. There is no evidence that humans can contract the EHD virus either from the midge or from handling and eating venison. Yeah, okay. Just like the BP oil well was no big deal, and the sinkhole is totally under control despite the 40-foot flames shooting up from out of the ground. Just like they got Katrina under control, just like they got everything under control, it's like they got the economy under control. Anyways, South Bend, Indiana. EHDs have been confirmed in 8 counties in Ohio. Pennsylvania also has the same problem. And you can see I have a whole list of links to the stories about the problems with the deer. And most of the stories that we do, you can see there are 2 columns here, and the links to the stories are over here on the left, unless it is included in the story itself. Some of them are, especially tonight. Okay, would you like a turkey sandwich with a Syria topping, sir? Turkey steps up Syria border presence as tensions mount. Turkey and Syria are like a drunk couple. Big fights and big makeups. These two have been going at each other periodically for far longer than you or I have been alive. This comes from FT.com. That's FT.com. Turkey has increased its military presence along its 900-kilometer border with Syria, scrambling jets and dispatching scores of tanks in the continuing face-off between Ankara and Damascus. You ever notice the city names over there sound like they're on some planet in Star Trek? Just saying. Let me see here. I believe I have. I don't know if I have. Well, we got the deer story there. We got the sombreros story there. Okay, so the show of force came after days of mounting confrontation between Syria and Turkey, which has also seen Ankara clash with Moscow. You probably recall earlier this week, Turkish F-16 fighters downed or forced a Syrian jet bound from Russia. Of course, the bear huffed and puffed and threatened to blow the Turkey down, but lo and behold, banned missile parts and whatnot were on board. Thus, Syria was caught red-handed as well as Russia. Not that we would ever do anything like that here in the United States. No, we'd never do anything like that. We'd do it better. Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan set out new rules of engagement in June under which Turkey would retaliate against any Syrian forces approaching the border that were perceived to be a threat, a doctrine some analysts have interpreted as warning to Syria to desist from airstrikes within 10 kilometers or so of the frontier, because the border that they share is called the frontier. Now you might think that this latest series of clashes between Syria and Turkey are due to the Syrian civil war. In a macro sense, that's true. The current clash is due to the civil war in Syria. However, these two share an immense border. I have done some background research on this. I didn't have time to go through the entire thing and learn it from front to back. But one thing that I've learned is that this dates all the way back to the Ottoman Empire. This dates back to when Syria was run by the French after World War I. This dates back to antiquity. And it has to do with the fight over a hydraulic empire that I mentioned at the top of the show. Let's look at some of the research. Let's go over here and look at, there's actually two links that I have with this particular article. There's actually 3 links. I have 2 of them up here. This is from the Wikipedia page about the Syria-Turkey relations. It's written rather well, and unlike some Wikipedia articles, it appears to be accurate as far as I can tell from my research. Pardon me for a moment. My voice is already getting hoarse. I had to take a drink of beverage, and I did it so quietly you couldn't even hear me. The Syrian-Turkish relations, and if somebody from Turkey sees this, they're going to go, no, it should be the Turkish-Syrian relations, have long been strained even though Turkey shares its longest common border with Syria. Various geographic and historical links also tie the two states together. Now, there is a more consumer-friendly version of this at about.com Middle East Issues. This is called Turkish-Syrian. There you go. Turkish-Syrian. Now, if you look over here, it says Syria-Turkey relations. But over here, it says Turkish-Syrian relations. See? They're cooperating already. There's no reason why we can't solve this problem. Turkish-Syrian relations and overview from confrontation to partnership and back. Turkish-Syrian relations over the past 20 years went from entrenched hostility to a burgeoning strategic partnership and back to the brink of war. Now, as I said, this dates back to the Ottoman Empire. This article says there is no shortage of historical baggage between the two countries, as with a lot of countries around the world, especially at times in the past between the United States and Mexico, in the past between Central American countries, in the past between European countries, like we're seeing now between Japan and China. Even though they don't share any borders, they are still at each other's throats. It's what humans do. Syria was under Ottoman rule from the early 16th century until the end of World War I, a period Syrian nationalists would later decry as an era of foreign domination that retarded the country's development and indigenous culture. You mean sort of like when you're letting unrestricted aliens come into your country without documenting them or having them immigrate legally? Sort of like that. Kind of like a bunch of people illegally coming over the border from one country to the other, taking jobs, retarding a country's development, and the indigenous culture of a country. I'm seeing some startling parallels. Let's continue. Quite similar to foreign Ottoman territories in southeast Europe, there was no love lost in Syria for the new Republic of Turkey established in 1921. And what better way to poison relations between the two new independent states than a territorial dispute? In the interwar years, that's interwar years, Syria was under French administration, mandated by the League of Nations, which in 1938 allowed Turkey to annex the majority Arab Alexandretta, or the Hatay province, a painful loss Syria contests to this day. Relations remain tense after Syria won independence in 1946, no matter who was in power in Damascus. And here we go to the historical disputes. Cold War politics. Turkey is a member of NATO, an alliance between the U.S. and military cooperation with Israel made it a natural foe to Syria. Syria is the closest Arab ally of the Soviet Union as well. Water disputes. Syria has complained that Turkey's massive development program for the border region, which includes dams, power plants, irrigation systems, robbed Syrian agriculture of precious water resources. Syria. Support for the PPK. The PPK is the Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK, and Syria's Hafez al-Assad backed the Kurdish Workers' Party. Turkey reached out. The PKK issue brought the two countries to the brink of war in the 1990s before Syria diffused the tension in 1998 by kicking out Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK leader it had sheltered. And that set up a strategic relationship between the two countries. But now, what's happening is into Turkey, there has been an influx of Syrian refugees coming over the border. And, of course, there was the incident, when was it? Last month sometime, where a Turkish training jet was shot down by the Syrians. And just yesterday, I believe, that would be Saturday the 13th, or the 12th, Friday the 12th, one of those 2 days, a Syrian helicopter dropped bombs on a Turkish village. So they're moving tanks back and forth, everybody's strutting, huffing, puffing, and threatening to blow the house down. And now, I would advise all of you to either go get yourself a nice cold beverage of your choice. You can choose an adult beverage, or you can choose a soft drink, preferably non-caffeinated, because you're going to need it. Those of you that exercise and have a heart monitor, like I do, you want to make sure you put your heart monitor on so you don't vapor lock over this next story, because you're not going to like it one bit, and neither do I. We'll just go ahead and wait for a minute while everybody gets their beverages. In fact, I will go ahead and take a few sips from my cold beverage that I have here at hand. While you go and get your cold beverages, sit back, relax, take a couple of deep breaths, maybe meditate. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, I'm back. You ready to get pissed off? Sure you are. It's surrounded by idiots, and by golly, we are, because the U.S. ambassador says the internet fee proposal is gaining momentum in the United freaking Nations. Yep, the overlords need more control over you. Apparently, the Obama administration asshats aren't doing enough to ruin the internet for everyone, so we need to have the UN step in and crap it up even more for all of us. Through a global fee, of course. It's for the children, you see, of the money bag twits that will be getting the money, not any of the poor children. U.S. Ambassador Terry Kramer warned on Friday that a proposal to give a United Nations agency more control over the internet is gaining momentum in other countries. Of course it is, because they're all run by despots. Not like our despot. Proposals to expand the UN's International Telecommunication Union's ITU authority over the internet could come up at a treaty conference in Dubai in December. Oh crap, Obama's still going to be in office when that happens. We're screwed. Anyways, here is the story from The Hill. That's The Hill Helicon.com, and this comes from their cleverly titled Helicon Valley blog. Let's see here. We have some more. The proposal by the European Telecommunications Network Operators Association could force websites like Google, Facebook, and Netflix to pay fees to network operators around the world. Talk about crapping up the internet. You owe $4.32 to India, another $16.32 to China, and $14.50 to Russia over there. And Bosnia, they want another 55 cents. And over there in England, they're going to want their 35 cents for the access per user. This is an incredibly stupid, bad idea. This is an epic bad idea. In fact, this idea is so bad that 1,000 years from now, whatever populates this planet next, their archaeologists are going to be digging down somewhere, maybe where New York City is right now, and they're going to unearth an old newspaper, and they're going to see this article in that newspaper, and they're going to go, holy crap, that was a bad idea. Let's see if we can find out why. You said the United States delegation to the conference will have to redouble its efforts to convince other countries that the proposal would only stifle innovation and economic growth. Super, ultra, duh. We support efforts to grow broadband markets, not just divvying a static pie of revenue between operators and governments, Kramer said in a speech in Washington hosted by the Telecommunications Industry Association. Democrats and Republicans in the United States are united. Let me reread that because it happens so rarely. Democrats and Republicans in the United States are united against proposals to increase international control of the Internet. Congress passed a non-binding resolution earlier this year urging the United States delegation to promote a global Internet free from government control and preserve and advance the successful multi-stakeholder model that governs the Internet today, which can only mean one thing, folks. If Obama loses the election sometime in December, I smell an executive order coming that's going to, go ahead and agree with this particular proposal and treaty that's going to come out from it. How much you want to bet? I got a pair of reading glasses I'm willing to put in the pot for the bet. We'll have a pool. Oh, brother. Okay, let's go on to the last story tonight. Oh, no, second to the last story. I don't know if I'm going to get to the last story because my throat's sore. I think I'll hold the last story tonight until tomorrow. Maybe. We'll see how this one goes. Terrence Jeffrey gets to the meat of the matter. How is the United States like the USSR was? I'll let you think about that one for a second, too. Let's see here if I can find the... Okay, here we go. The assessment painted a bleak picture for the newly elected American president. Economic growth had slowed, investment had diminished, and growth in the labor force had declined. Oil and coal production were down, and energy costs were up. The situation made it impossible for the government to continue defense spending or improve the lot of consumers. Sounds like Romney's first day on the job, huh? No, sorry, it's not. It is... Simply stated, the assessment concluded something we'll have to give. The report was published in January 1981, just as President Ronald Reagan was about to take office, but it was not about the United States. It was the CIA's assessment of the Soviet Union economy. As Reagan prepared for his first term, the CIA concluded that the economic prospects in the USSR were gloomier and policy choices more difficult than at any time since Stalin's death. Here are the CIA's key judgments from this article. And this article was from cnsnews.com. That's cnsnews.com. It is by Terence P. Jeffrey. That's Terence P. Jeffrey, and it was published on October 11, 2012. The CIA's key judgments included: during the past few years, the USSR experienced a major slowdown in oil production growth, ding, a decline in coal production, ding, a major rise in energy costs, ding, a fall-off in investment and labor force growth, double ding. Their problem is that annual increments of national output since the 1980s would be too small to permit the increases in investment in industry, agriculture, and transportation needed to revive the economy in the latter part of the decade. That kind of sounds like the United States right now. 2 decades have passed. Here is new data that needs to be assessed. According to the U.S. Energy Information Agency, U.S. domestic crude oil averaged 7.355 million barrels per month in 1990. By 2011, it had dropped to 5.658 million barrels per month. In 1990, coal production was 1.29 billion short tons. In 2008, it peaked at 1.172 billion short tons. In 2011, it had dropped down to 1.096 billion short tons. This year, the first 8 months, 2012, they are at 648.8 million tons of coal here in the United States. The average is 718 at this point in the year. In November 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, the average price for the gallon of unleaded gasoline in the United States was 99.9 cents. This August, it was $3.71. Had the price for a gallon of unleaded gas increased at the same rate as inflation since 1989, it would now cost $1.86. This article goes on and on and on. And the comparisons between the late USSR, the latter part of its years, and what we are going through here in the United States right now because of the really, really bad decisions that are made by the government. It's almost exactly what happened to the USSR. And you're hearing about it on USSAMichigan.com. Go figure. I'm going to go ahead and do the last story tonight, even though I wasn't going to. It's titled, Let's Trash the People That Actually Create Jobs. This one comes with some sound clips, and I thought it was very interesting. It is goes into economics, and part of this story goes very, very deeply into economics, economic styles, and what is happening to our economy right now. Let me take a second to go through this and see if I can find exactly what I am looking for. I'm actually going to go back to the story that I was just doing because there's far more to be talked about with that story and the comparison between the end of the USSR and our particular economic situation right now. It can be argued that on a global scale, it's all over the planet. The EU's having problems. I mean, look at Spain. They're in the crapper. Look at Greece. They're, man, oh man, Greece and Spain. That's two really, really bad scenes. And now the Nazi Party is making a big resurgence in Greece. Big resurgence. If you haven't checked out that story, you should Google it for yourself. The second part of this is something that happened back in 2008. This is something that, had I been doing the show in 2008, I would have warned you about. But at that particular time, it was up to people like Limbaugh and Beck, and they were, back in 2008, they were the pretty much the two big voices on the radio during the day. There's Savage. He was broadcasting at night. And there were people in Congress, there were politicians, there were commenters on some of the mainstream news channels, not all of them, maybe one or two commentators on the channels. But back when he first took office, there was a big discussion in alternative and talk radio whether or not we should pursue the Keynesian economic model, which Obama favored. There was a big discussion. It wasn't a debate within the Obama administration, because they already made their minds up. They decided that they're going to crap up this economy, and by God, come hell or high water, that's what they were going to do. But the people in the media, especially in the alternative media and talk radio, they were trying to educate the people about what Obama intended to do. That, of course, in hindsight, he has done. Of course, I expect most of the audience was sleeping back then. I'm sure you were. So let's take a look at the history behind this particular model. If you went into a coma in 2008 and just came out of it and were asked a question, someone with a decent intelligence would immediately look around like this and go, why are you using the Keynesian model of economics? That's dumb. Because it's never worked 100% of the time. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's take a look back, way back in 2009. And I'm not going to cite Rush, and I'm not going to cite Glenn Beck. Let's take a look at NPR from 2009. Let me see here. There we go, NPR, National Public Radio. And that's, there's John Keyes right there. Right there. John Maynard Keynes. Yeah, 1940. There he is. There's a bastard himself. It's all his fault. This is from January 29th of 2009. John Maynard Keynes is an unlikely hero for our times. B.S. Keynes, a British economist who died more than 60 years ago, inspired Barack Obama's plan to save the U.S. economy with a massive round of government spending. The British economist published his big theory, the one underpinning most of what Obama intends to do in 1936. Keep in mind, this came from 2009. By the 1980s, many believed Keynes' ideas were utterly discredited. By the 1980s, many believed Keynes' ideas were utterly discredited. But he is the man who came up with the then radical notion that a government can pull a country out of a deep recession by spending a lot of money. So, that is from NPR in 2009. And now, from 2009, we have this treatise by Carl Horowitz right here. This is from Promoting Ethics in Public Life, the National Legal and Policy Center. This is an analysis. Let me see. Their website address is nlpc.org. That is nlpc.org. An analysis. Obama stimulus plan invokes Keynes. And there you see another picture of the bastard right there. The $787 billion economic stimulus package passed and signed into law last month had any number of co-sponsors in Congress, but in a real sense its main author was somebody who has been deceased for more than 60 years, John Maynard Keynes. The measure and proposals subsequent to it represent a tribute to a highly flawed, though original, thinker. They also speak to a larger ongoing pendulum shift in theory and policy. Now, from 2009, this article from 2009 says this: much has been written, and deservedly so, about President Obama's sense of racial grievance, his radicalism, his circle of Chicago friends and fixers, and his intense identification with Abraham Lincoln. Yet only recently, that level of attention has been given to his world view, all but in the name of Keynesian, to the current economic crisis. And here's the thing, folks. Here is the thing. And this is how we're going to end tonight's show. We're going to end tonight's show with an audio from the Cato Institute. That's the Cato Institute. I forget where I got this audio clip from. It may be from a YouTube video. I don't know. You can do a search. The Cato Institute came up with an excellent explanation of this economic model. You will recognize our economy from the IRS rebates to the spending. This was recorded in 2008. I repeat, what you're about to hear came from 2008. This was the warning bell for what is happening right now. If you are recently aware of what is happening, this will send a chill down your spine and make you say, my God, what have we done? All I can tell you is that we shall all burn for this. We shall all burn together for what we have allowed to happen in this country. Now, before I play this clip, keep in mind that this was before what has happened. This was at the start of the current administration's first and only term in office. This was from 2008. Keep that in mind. And I am going to use this clip to end the show. We are going to say the last story from tonight for tomorrow about a man that creates jobs, lots and lots of jobs, tens and 20,000s of jobs, and what he has to say about this election that's coming up. So, we are going to listen to the Cato Institute and their description from 2008. I am right now saving some documents on a couple of desktops here in preparation for ending the show. This goes on for 6 minutes and 24 seconds. After that, the show will be over. I invite all of you to stop by the USSA Michigan website and take a look at tonight's show notes and all the links, articles, and everything else, all the research that we've done. You can also listen to the audio version of the show when it becomes available. We are also probably going to start putting the video version of the entire show on the USSAMichigan.com website and putting highlights on YouTube, because it is a tremendous amount of work to get everything working correctly. Okay, and we're trying to reduce our workload a little bit on account of my ticker that is around 95 beats per minute right now, way high than it should be. So let's listen to a super awesome audio clip from the Cato Institute, and we will see you tomorrow night.
During the 1930s, America was suffering from a deep downturn. An economist named John Maynard Keynes argued that the economy could be boosted if the government borrowed money and spent it. According to this approach, which is now known as Keynesianism, this new spending would put money in people's pockets, and the recipients of the funds would then spend the money. This would, according to the theory, prime the pump as the money began circulating through the economy. The Keynesians also said that some tax cuts, particularly lump sum rebates, could have the same impact, since the purpose is to have the government borrow and somehow put money in the hands of people who will spend it. So is this the right recipe to boost a flagging economy? Let's first look at whether Keynesianism makes sense from a theoretical perspective, and then look at the real-world evidence. Keynesian theory sounds good, and it would be nice if it made sense, but it has a rather glaring logical fallacy. It overlooks the fact that, in the real world, government can't inject money into the economy without first taking money out of the economy. More specifically, the theory only looks at one half of the equation, the part where government puts money in the economy's right pocket. But where does the government get that money? It borrows it, which means it comes out of the economy's left pocket. There is no increase in what Keynesians refer to as aggregate demand. Keynesianism doesn't boost national income, it merely redistributes it. The pie is sliced differently, but it's not any bigger. The people who lend the money to government generally are not the same people who get money in their pockets because of the new spending or tax rebates, but that's not important. The Keynesian theory is based on the notion that there will be an increase in overall available cash, yet that clearly is not the case. Some advocates of this theory get a bit more creative and say that Keynesianism works because it increases consumer spending rather than the money sitting idle. But money that is unspent by consumers does not sit idle. It winds up in the banking system someplace and is used to finance investment spending. The really clever Keynesians then respond by saying people won't lend and borrow in a weak economy. But in that type of dismal economic environment, people are so fearful that they try to increase their savings, so the bulk of any so-called stimulus winds up in the banking system anyway. Before shifting from theory to evidence, we should quickly note that government could finance stimulus spending by printing money rather than borrowing. Thankfully, that option doesn't seem to be on the table, since almost all politicians now realize that it would be foolish to mimic the disastrous inflationary policies of basket case economies such as Argentina and Zimbabwe. Looking now at the real-world evidence, it's even more clear that Keynesianism is a failure. Let's go back to the Great Depression. In his 4 years, Herbert Hoover was a poster boy for statism. He increased taxes dramatically, including a boost in the top tax rate from 25% to 63%. He imposed harsh protectionist policies. He significantly increased intervention in private markets. And most important, at least from a Keynesian perspective, he boosted government spending by 47% in just 4 years. And he certainly had no problem financing that spending with debt. He entered office in 1929 when there was a surplus, and he left office in 1933 with a deficit of 4.5% of GDP. So how did Hoover's big government Keynesian experiment work? As the chart shows, growth went down and unemployment went up. Unfortunately, other than being a bit more reasonable on trade, Roosevelt followed the same approach. The top tax rate was boosted to 79%, and government intervention became more pervasive. Government spending, of course, skyrocketed, rising by 106% between 1933 and 1940. But this big government approach didn't work for Roosevelt any better than it did for Hoover. Unemployment remained very high throughout the 1930s, and overall output did not get back to the 1929 level until World War II. Other Keynesian episodes generated similarly dismal results, though fortunately never as bad as the Great Depression. Gerald Ford did a Keynesian stimulus focused on tax rebates in the mid-1970s. The economy did not improve, but why would it? After all, borrowing money from one group and giving it to another group does nothing to increase economic output. As we've explained in other videos, tax cuts only boost the economy if they reduce the tax penalty on work, saving, and investment, i.e., lower tax rates, not gimmicks. More recently, George W. Bush gave out so-called rebate checks in 2001 and 2008, yet both times there was no positive effect. And he certainly was a big spender, yet that didn't work either. Not that this should be a big surprise. Even left-wing international bureaucracies are producing research showing that bigger government hurts economic performance by misallocating national resources. Indeed, if you want to get a survey of the literature paper reviewing this evidence showing that big government means less growth, just send an email to the address on the screen. The international evidence also shows the foolishness of Keynesianism. The most obvious example may be Japan, which throughout the 1990s tried to use so-called stimulus packages to jumpstart a stagnant economy. But the only thing that went up was Japan's national debt, which more than doubled during the decade, and now is far above even Italy when measured as a share of GDP. The economy, as represented by this chart showing Japan's Nikkei stock market average, remained in the dumps. Let's end this video by asking a simple question. If Keynesian spending doesn't make sense from a theoretical perspective, and also fails every time it is tried in the real world, why do politicians keep trying the same approach? Your guess is as